Just any cell. It can be a plant cell, it can be an animal cell. Just see what you remember. Okay. Parts. Stone doesn't matter. Not reflecting it, but trying to get your brain. Remember.
I don't.
Not very. We've already heard from you, I think, 5 times. No, I still want to go to that. I know. Yeah, no, I got some blondes. You can find again. Oh, you just I'm not. Hi.
This class, would it okay if you help me with this?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
So you're going to draw a cell, you're going to label any structures you can remember. If you can remember what anything does, you can also jot down what the job is of any of the structures. If you didn't learn it last year, it's not the end of the earth. Don't worry about it. If you don't remember anything from last year, again, not the end of the earth. It's all good. If you're having trouble getting started and you would like to draw an animal cell, what shape should you start with? Circle. It's kind of bigger. All right. Now, if this is an animal cell, does anyone remember? See if you can tell your partner what this structure is, the one that's on the outside of the cell. Maybe? It's a longer word than wall. Membrane. Chat with your partner, decide what you think or what you remember that the cell membrane does for the cell. What is its purpose? Not all of them, I think, but yeah. Well, yeah, I think they all do, but plants have a big one. Yeah. What do you think the job is of the cell membrane? Protection. It keeps things in, it keeps things out. It allows certain things in and out. Good. Look, we've only drawn a circle and we already have one thing. That's great. There's another shape we could draw inside the cell, which is a very prominent structure in the cell. The nucleus. It's really hard to say. Very often people want to say nucleus, but it's nucleus. Nucleus. So let's draw ourselves a nucleus. Look, it's another circle. See if you can tell your partner what you think this line here is pointing to. What is that structure? Oh, no, but you're really close. The cell membrane can also be called the plasma membrane. It is the nuclear membrane. Look, on the outside of the cell, what do we have? We have the cell membrane. What do we have on the outside of the nucleus? The nuclear membrane. Yeah. And I'm going to highlight this one and the nucleus because this year we're actually not focusing on the entire cell. This year we're focusing on the nucleus and what its job is. Does anyone remember what the job of the nucleus is? See if you can chat amongst yourselves. What is the job of the nucleus? Are you okay, Rohan? Tired? Yeah. All right, so what is our job of the nucleus? What's it doing? It controls the cell. And we're going to be focusing this year on how it controls the cell. So we got one circle, we got two circles, and in fact, we could draw, guess what? One circle, two circle, three circles. I don't know if you learned this one last year. We'll find out. So we have the cell, we have the nucleus, and then we got a black spot inside the nucleus. That is the nucleolus. So we have the nucleus and then we have the nucleolus. I don't know if you guys know what the nucleolus does. It's not one of the more obvious ones. Anyone know that one? We'll come back to it later. We'll come back to that one later. I think I have more than my fair share. Just keep them for now. Yeah. All right, so we've drawn three circles. We'll come back to what the job of the nucleolus is later. Anyone else can think of another structure that's in there? Anne? The cytoplasm? We have the cytoplasm. Yes, where is the cytoplasm? Everywhere. Everywhere that's not the nucleus, basically, is the cytoplasm. So I'll let you know right now that the words that I'm highlighting, those are structures that you are going to be responsible for this year because they have to do with how the nucleus controls the cell. Okay, so these are all words that you're going to need to know. And I know we only have 2 weeks to learn all of this. So let me explain what your test will be. I know you're like, test? I just got back, but we only have 2 weeks. It's going to be on the last day of classes, okay? If you miss it, you have to come in during the week off and like on the Monday or whatever and come write it. All right, so don't be away because you don't want to spend your week off like coming in here and writing a test. And for this unit, I really like for you guys to come up with your own study sheet. And your study sheet will be something you can bring in with you to the test. Okay? I will be honest with you. Most people, by the time they were done the study sheet in the past, they don't really need to look at it in order to write the test. Most people said it was actually not so useful because they knew most of the basics and then they kind of had to think about things. Yeah? However, you can come in and you can have a labeled diagram of a cell. You'd be like nuclear membrane, nucleus. You can tell yourself what the nucleus does. It's got to be handwritten, unless you have, like, if you have a serious like written output thing, like let me know, I can make exception for that. But I do not want printouts of pictures, because you don't learn anything by printing things out and sticking them on. Okay, so at some point, I will provide you with paper. Right now, what you might want to do is you might want to be like, oh, look, Ms. Spence said this one's important, and this one's important, and this one, and this one for this year. Okay, so now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 words that you are responsible for already. Yes. Ribosomes. Oh, I'm so happy you said ribosomes. So this is a ribosome. And I'm trying to draw them, but really they're so small that they end up just looking like little black specks. They look like, you know, seeds or something like that, okay? And there are free-floating ribosomes. There's also ribosomes that live on a certain structure. Does anyone remember that structure? Yeah? Not the Golgi, but it looks a lot like the Golgi. Go on. Endoplasmic something. Yes. It is the endoplasmic reticulum, which, if you don't like that name, you can just call it the ER, because that's a really long, crazy name, the endoplasmic reticulum. And what it looks like is it looks like this, basically a series of membranes. Whoops. And on there, this pen is crazy. Okay, there we go. You might find some, what do you think these are? Those are ribosomes. And this is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Also known as the rough ER. But one thing you're going to notice, what did I not do with this word? Didn't highlight it, didn't star it. So although it is useful for you to remember, like just to kind of jog your memory in case you're going to go take biology 11 or biology 12 in your grade 11 year, you're not responsible for knowing about the rough ER this year, okay? It does have a role in protein production, which we will be looking at, but we're not going to get that deep into it, okay? So, does anyone know what the ribosomes do? Oh, and ribosomes should be highlighted, and it should be starred. There we go. Does anyone know what the ribosomes do? It's where proteins are made. So sometimes proteins are made out in the, what do we call all that blobby stuff in the middle? The cytoplasm. And sometimes proteins are made on the rough ER. Okay, so proteins can be made on the rough ER, in which case there's all those membranes. These are membranes, and they can be packaged up and sent outside the cell. But if proteins are going to be used inside the cell, they're usually made from just free-floating ribosomes. Okay. Now that we've talked about ribosomes, does anyone remember what the nucleolus does? It makes something. It makes the ribosomes. Yeah. Ribosome. Oh, the other one, the endoplasmic reticulum. That one? No, cytoplasm. The one that's right there. Nucleolus. Nucleolus. Here, let's write like a little pronunciation K. Nucleolus. You'll also hear some people pronounce it nucleolus, but I do not pronounce it that way. So I go nucleolus. But if you hear people say nucleolus, that is also a correct pronunciation. Okay? And I don't mind which one you use. So the nucleolus makes the ribosomes. And the ribosomes, what do they make? They make the proteins. All right. Any other structures in the cell that you remember, Adri? Mitochondria, yes. And if you don't know what the mitochondria do, you've probably been living under a rock because it's so famous, it's a meme. What does the mitochondria do? Powerhouse of the cell. And if you haven't heard that yet, don't worry. It will come into your radars at some point or other. It's just one of those random facts that people always learn in high school, and it's like the one thing you remember from biology class in high school. What do I remember? Mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. So basically what the mitochondria does is it takes sugar in the form of glucose from your blood, and it turns it into a molecule that's called ATP that your body can use to move your muscles or make other things happen, okay? So there's your mitochondria. What do you notice about mitochondria? The word that I've written. It's not highlighted, it doesn't have a star. Okay. Are we missing anything from here? Yes. Lysosomes, yes. And they just look like a circle. Anyone remember what the lysosome is or what it does? Yeah? What it does is it will actually, like, if you put anything in there, it's got like little digestive enzymes that will chomp up everything. And so it's kind of like the garbage disposal of the cell. Okay? Also, that word is not highlighted. Yes? Vesicles. Yes. And guess what they look like? They look like circles. Lysosomes and vesicles, when you're drawing a picture like this, really hard to tell the difference. They're just circles. We're not going to have to worry about it though, because again, vesicles are not highlighted or starred. So if you're like, I don't know if that's a lysosome or a vesicle, doesn't matter. And vesicles are just kind of ways of getting things into and out of the cell, okay? Yes? Cytoplasm, what? Cytoplasm. Yes. Okay, cytoplasm we actually have. And what is the cytoplasm? It's just the stuff inside the cell. It's actually really full. It's like kind of a gel almost. It's like a liquid gel, but there's all kinds of things in it. If you go on and you study biology in grade 11 and 12, you'll learn there's microfibers in there. There's microtubules that move the vesicles around. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the cytoplasm. But if you, at this point, think of the cell like a big sphere full of soup, yes? The cytoplasm is like the broth of the soup. It's what kind of gives the cell its shape. Otherwise, if there wasn't anything inside, it would just collapse. Yeah? It's what everything else just sits in. Yeah. Yeah, of course. So this is all the cell outside the nucleus. It's the broth in the soup. I just want to make sure I've got everything here. I think I've got everything. Let's see. I'm going to cheat. Oh yeah, we forgot the Golgi body, but it looks a lot like the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Do we want to draw the Golgi? It's not on your list. Shall we just leave it? You want the Golgi? Okay, it looks a lot like the rough endoplasmic reticulum because it's just a series of membranes that package things. Okay, it's often actually attached to the rough ER. Things go into the Golgi. It's called either the Golgi body or the Golgi apparatus. I just like that name, Golgi. Apparatus. But again, do you need to know that for this year? No. So, now if we had a plant cell, there would be a few other things that are missing here. See if you can tell your partner what things are missing in this cell that you would find in a plant cell. What does a plant cell have that an animal cell does not? It has chloroplasts. And they have these little like stacks of discs in them, kind of. Do you know what chloroplasts do? They process light and turn it into usable energy. And that usable energy is sugar. Anyone remember what that process is called? That is called photosynthesis. We're taking light energy and we're turning it into chemical energy. Yeah. Has a cell wall. So you still have a cell membrane, but usually around the outside there is also a cell wall. How do trees stand up otherwise? Right? They don't have a skeleton, right? And if you didn't have a skeleton, what would happen to you? Yes? So trees don't have a skeleton, but what they do have is they have a lot of cell walls, which around each cell has a cell wall. And it provides structure and protection. And inside the cell wall is the cell membrane. Okay. All righty. Is there anything else that a plant cell has that the other ones don't? Yes? Pardon me? It has smoothie R. Actually, both plant and animal cells have smoothie R. We could draw the smoothie R in, but it looks a lot like the Golgi, so I'm going to skip it because, again, we don't need to talk about the smoothie R this year. It packages up fats and processes them and stuff. Yeah. It has the large central vacuole. Which is just basically a big blob full of liquid that keeps the cell perked up. So if you have a healthy, happy plant, its cell vacuole, the large central vacuole, is full. What happens though if it doesn't get enough water? Again, it starts to wilt. The cell wall is still there, but it doesn't have anything pushing out against the edges. So it provides structure and support. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to take a look at DNA and how it works. Okay, so if you want to take a 5-minute break, we'll be back at 1:15. All righty? Do not make noise in the hallway. Do not go between other classes. Do not disturb anybody.
Can I go back?
Yeah.
Sorry,
5 minutes, so 15:15, 15 after.
Well, we'll do this, maybe our team attendance, that would be a good idea.
Alrighty, we're gonna get started. We got a little video to watch. We're gonna watch it once, just to watch, so you don't have to fill in anything. Okay, we're not gonna we're just gonna watch and you're just gonna absorb. All right? And then once we've watched it and absorbed it, we're gonna go through it together. Okay? All right. What is DNA and how does it work? Does anyone know where DNA lives? Genetics, it has to do with genetics. Does anyone know where it lives in the cell? Sorry? It lives in the nucleus. All right. So if you have your phone out, phone needs to go away. If you're not paying attention up here, you need to pay attention up here because this is important. This is like the whole key to the whole unit is what is DNA.
Stated Clearly presents What is DNA and how does it work? DNA, also known as deoxyribonucleic acid, is a molecule. It's a bunch of atoms stuck together. In the case of DNA,
What do we call a bunch of atoms stuck together? Well, we call it DNA, but there's also a class of chemicals with a bunch of atoms stuck together. It is a compound indeed. Also, it's not quite a crystal lattice. This is a little bit different. Yes, molecule. DNA is a molecule. It's what we call a macromolecule. What does the prefix macro mean? Not micro, but macro. Macro means big, which means DNA is what kind of molecule? Big, although it's still really small. Okay?
these atoms combine to form the shape of a long, spiraling ladder, sort of like this one here. If you ever studied biology or saw the movie Jurassic Park, you probably heard that DNA acts as a blueprint or a recipe for a living thing. But how? How on earth can a mere molecule act as a blueprint for something as complex and wonderful as a tree, a dog, or a dinosaur? To help answer that question, let's first take a quick look at amino acids. Amino acids are tiny little chemicals inside our bodies that are so important, they're often referred to as the building blocks of life. There's about 20 different kinds, each with their own unique shape. The neat thing about them is they can be attached to each other kind of like Legos to produce an endless variety of larger particles known as proteins. Amino acids make up proteins. Proteins, along with other chemicals, combine to form living cells. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. And organs, when they're all put together and functioning, of course, combine to form living creatures like you and me. These proteins that make up our bodies, and keep in mind there's millions of different kinds of proteins, they each have to be formed in the perfect shape in order to function. If they're the wrong shape, they usually won't work.
So what do proteins need in order to function properly? To be in the absolute right shape.
That's where DNA comes in. DNA does a lot of interesting things, some of which we don't fully understand, but one of its main and most well understood functions is to tell amino acids how to line up and form themselves into the perfect protein shapes. In theory, if the right proteins are built at the right time and in the right place, everything else from cells to organs to entire creatures will come out just fine. This here is a simplified model of DNA. It shows us that the steps of the ladder are made up of 4 different kinds of chemicals.
I want you to take a look at those 4 different kinds of chemicals and see if you notice any patterns within there. Yeah, T always goes with A and C always goes with G. And if you have trouble remembering that, C and G are the same shape. Yes, right? Because a G is just a C with a little tail on it. And there's another way of remembering it, but we'll come to it later because it's kind of fun to learn on its own.
Shown here by different colors and letters. If you look at just one half of the molecule, you can read its chemical sequence or genetic code from top to bottom, sort of like a book. A single strand of DNA is extremely long, millions of.
Now, what does this shape look like? Does that remind you of anything? Yeah? It looks like a ladder. Yes. And people will often refer to it as like a ladder shape. Do you know what we call the sides of the ladder? We just call them the sides of the ladder. Okay. Do you know what we call the little crossbars of the ladder? If you climb a ladder, you're holding on to the... You guys obviously don't climb enough ladders. You hold on to the rungs of the ladder. Those are like the little crossbars in a ladder. They're called the rungs of the ladder. So those A's, T's, G's, and C's make up the rungs of the ladder. Yeah? Yep.
Letters long. It spends most of its life coiled up like a noodle, living inside the nucleus or the centerpiece of a cell. Amino acids, however.
You can watch that again because we're going to zoom out. Okay, we're going to say, okay, here's a real close-up.
Or genetic code,
and then we're
from top to bottom, sort of like a book. A single strand of DNA is extremely long, millions of letters long. It spends most of its life coiled up like a noodle, living inside the nucleus or the centerpiece of a cell. Amino acids, however, live outside the nucleus in what's called the cytoplasm.
Now, let's see if we can remember. What is DNA giving us instructions for? How to shape proteins. And what makes up proteins? Amino acids. So we have a problem, don't we? Because where is the DNA? Where are the instructions to make the proteins? They're in the nucleus, surrounded by the bubble, the nuclear membrane. But the things that actually make up the proteins are they in the nucleus? The amino acids, are the amino acids in the nucleus? No, they're out in the cytoplasm, so we have a little problem. We're going to have to get the instructions out to the pieces. So it's like if you went to IKEA and you bought a piece of furniture and the instructions were inside your house, but the IKEA furniture was outside your house in your driveway, and you were trying to build the IKEA furniture with the instructions inside your house. But you're outside with all the pieces. Problem, yes?
To help DNA interact with the cytoplasm and convert those amino acids into proteins, Special chemicals inside the nucleus make partial copies of the DNA code. These partial copies, called RNA, look a lot like DNA, but they're shorter, of course, and they're missing one of their sides. Their small shape and size allows them to fit through tiny pores in the nucleus, out to the cytoplasm, and into the mouth of another particle called a ribosome. Ribosome
So let's just go back. DNA in the nucleus.
is of the DNA code.
Now, do you see how big that molecule is, the DNA? It's all those little squiggly lines. That is one strand of DNA. Okay? And we have actually 42 of those strands in each of our cells. Can you imagine how the DNA, could it get out into the cytoplasm? Probably not. But what we do is we make these tiny little copies. Does anyone remember what we called them? Not DNA, but RNA. These tiny little copies of pieces of the DNA make it out into the rest of the cell. What's it called? Starts with C, cytoplasm, and they go out through these little pores in the nuclear membrane.
These partial copies, called RNA, look a lot like DNA, but they're shorter, of course, and they're missing one of their sides. Their small shape and size allows them to fit through tiny pores in the nucleus, out to the cytoplasm, and into the mouth of another particle called a ribosome.
What do ribosomes do? They make proteins.
Ribosomes are protein-building machines. They read the RNA code 3 letters at a time, suck amino acids out of their surroundings, and stick them together in a chain according to the RNA code. As the chain grows, it bends, it folds, and it sticks to itself to form a perfectly shaped protein. Every 3 letters of the RNA code tell the ribosome which of the 20 different kinds of amino acids should be added next. For example, CAA tells the ribosome to grab a glutamine. AGU tells it to grab a serine, and so on. Once a protein is built, it can then go on to do a number of different things, one of which could be to help form a brand new cell. So to answer the original question, what is DNA? DNA is a molecular blueprint for a living thing. How does it work? DNA creates RNA, RNA creates protein, proteins go on to form life. This entire process, as complicated, as sophisticated, as magical as it might seem, is entirely based in chemistry. It can be studied, it can be understood. I'm John Perry, and that's DNA stated clearly.
Okay. So we are going to go to...
Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw,
we're going to go to page 15, 1-5. Page 15. Okay, so we're going to start with the word for DNA. But before we do that, we're going to draw a little black diamond beside it, because if you never want to learn how to write the actual word, you don't have to in grade 9. But if you want to take biology 11 or biology 12, you probably will have to. So you can put a little black diamond beside this. So DNA stands for, the D is for deoxy. In fact, it's not just deoxy, it's deoxyribo. Deoxyribo. And then the N stands for, and it's still part of the same word, nucleic. Can you guess why it's called a nucleic something or other? Yeah, because it's in the nucleus. Yes. Deoxyribonucleic. And then do you remember what the A stands for? Acid. Yes. And if you want to learn that word, it's kind of fun. But like I said, you're not required to. If you just want to call it DNA, that's great. Okay? Deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is what kind of chemical thing is DNA? It is a molecule. It's a macromolecule. Yes, it is. And what is a molecule? It's a bunch of atoms stuck together. These atoms combine to form the shape of a long, and let's actually find another picture of DNA here because I want to, DNA. Now remember how it looked like a ladder? What have we done with that ladder? We've twisted it. So what shape is it? It is a twisted ladder. And what is the function of DNA? Its job is to act as a blueprint or recipe to build an organism, like a tree, a dog, or a dinosaur. Now here's a new word. Okay, so words that you need to know here. Let's go through and star things. You need to know DNA. Do you need to know deoxyribonucleic acid? No. If you want to, you can. You should know what DNA is. And actually, I'm going to give you another word here. The twisted ladder is also known as a double helix. So what is a double helix? A double helix is just a twisted ladder. Have you guys ever heard of a helix before? A helix is basically a spiral. And so what we've got is we've got two things that spiral around attached to each other. That's why it's called a double helix. Okay, and we're going to star that one as well. Next, we have amino acids. Guess what? That's a word we need to know. Amino acids are tiny little chemicals inside our bodies. They are often referred to as the something of life, building blocks. What do you think? Do you think you're going to have to remember the name phenylalanine or proline or aspartic acid or glutamic acid or serine? No. Okay, they're just there to give you an idea of, you know, some of the interesting names and shapes. And of course, you don't need to know what atoms make them up, but it's, you know, you get a little picture of, oh my gosh, I've got some carbons. Most of them are carbon-based. Yeah, and I've got some interesting structures, lots of carbons, lots of hydrogens, and some oxygens and nitrogens, but mostly carbon and hydrogen. And I'm just going to mention this. If you're not interested, just ignore me. This little bit right here, this C double bond O single bond O, that's the acid part. I'm going to stick an H on here. That's the acid part. And the little part with the N, that's the amine part. So if you're keen on biology, when you get to biology 12, you'll learn that. You don't need to know that. It's not going to be on the enriched section, nothing. It's just like sort of for your own interest. So you can see once again, we have the acid part here. And we have the amine part here. And if you were to go through all of these, you'd be able to see an acid part and an amine part on all of them. And that's why they're called amine acids, because they all have an amino group and an acid group. But like I said, do you need to know that? No. My major was in biochemistry, so I'm like a huge dork about this. Yes. Yes, you can. All right. So here we go. There are about, does anyone remember how many types? 20. There's about 20 types of amino acids, each with their own unique shape. The neat thing about amino acids is that they can be attached to each other kind of like Legos to produce an endless variety of larger particles called proteins. So many amino acids come together to make proteins. And you can see what's special about all those proteins. They all have their own unique shape. Oh, and this class doesn't end at 45, it ends at 40. So we're going to stop there for today. And I'm going to let you know that your homework is to read and do pages 1 to 4. Okay, 1 to 4. So read the question, read it and do the questions.
And crocodile was like 5 million something. How does this stuff?
Read and do the questions on pages 1 to 4. It's okay. Oh, you should probably like, you're gonna sign out?
I'm gonna call my mom.
Yeah, good plan.